Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Why you shouldn't brag about your illegal activities to people that do not like you much. I started renting a house about 5 years ago. I had always lived in apartments and I was excited to finally have some space and privacy. This was ruined within the first week by my jerk neighbor, and he made my 4 years at that house miserable. He's in his late 40s or early 50s, and despite seeming like a fully functional adult, he has never lived outside of his parents' home. He spends every possible minute cleaning or admiring his truck, so he practically lives in the driveway. When he isn't bragging about some jerk move that he just pulled on someone, he's hitting on the wives and daughters of anyone on the street. I moved in during the winter and started noticing footsteps in my yard in the morning. I found out that he was walking into my yard to look in my windows and see what I was watching / playing at night. I bought a simple security system and put a few cameras up, and this stopped. Then he started mowing my side yard. He would mow it the day after I did. I asked my landlord about this and was told that Mike, the creepy neighbor, considered it his property and kept arguing about the property line. It is just grass, so I let it go. If I had guests over, he would stare at them and sometimes make comments when I wasn't around to hear him. If I was in the backyard, he would have a reason to be in his backyard. If I was in the house or the front yard, he was in his driveway where he could see in my living room. If I was mowing the yard, he would get out a lawn chair and sit and watch, putting it away as soon as I was done. It came to a head when I caught him sending his dog into my front yard one morning, instead of letting it out into his fenced-in backyard like he normally would. I told him to stay on his side of the property line, and he said that he was going to break into my house and smash my cameras and computer. Of course, the cops were called and he got off with a warning. Last fall, I told my landlord that I was going to move out. During the conversation, I found out that Mike was on workers' comp for an injury that he got at work, and that he was now bragging about how he was using his workers' comp checks to set up his own under-the-table landscaping business. My landlord, like most of the neighborhood, does not really like Mike. The landlord's son and family lives across the street, and Mike has hit on the wife a few times over the years and has started to try to talk to their 17-year-old daughter. I waited for a day when he had his new work truck and trailer with his new name and number on the door, and I made a video of him working in his yard and carrying 50 bags of mulch and climbing ladders. I sent videos and pictures to the fraud department of the workers' comp office. Today I just found out that he was found guilty of fraud, ordered to pay back every dollar, and may end up in jail. So yeah, hopefully this will escalate to something bigger. As for me, I am happily living in a new place that has a lot of land between me and the neighbors. Next story. Entitled Mother Puts Me on Fire with a Flare Gun, then Tries to Kill a Police Dog. So this story happened on July 8, 2020. Me and my dad have decided that we will go shooting at a nearby range. We have a gas pistol, which in our country you do not need a license to have. Now this pistol can only shoot blank or gas cartridges that allows us to shoot a flare, pyro, etc. So we went there, shot a few pyros and flares, and then when I just loaded a new flare, about 20 feet away from us appeared our entitled lady and her humble kid. The kid looked like 11 and Karen was about 40. So they approach us from the back and I hear the typical, "Excuse me." And I just tell myself in the head, oh god, it's happening. And the conversation follows. Yes?
Could you please let my kid shoot?
Now we have some restrictions about guns. 1. You must be at least 15 to shoot the gun. 2. For you to be able to shoot the explosive from the gun, you must have paperwork, which my dad has. So I tell her I'm sorry, but I can't let him shoot. He's too young for that.
No, he's not. He's 17.
Mom, let him go. We will rent one right there. And do you even have the paperwork to shoot explosive from it?
No, but you do, right?
Dad rolls his eyes at this. Karen gets angry and yells,
Just give me the gun.
No, and you don't even have the paperwork.
Fine, I'll take it myself.
She grabs the gun from my hand and pulls the trigger. The flare went off right on my t-shirt. I put the fire down and shout for security. When Karen realizes what she did, she grabs a flare box and bolts from the range going to the forest. Her kid just stands there frozen. Then comes a security guard. He asks me, are you okay? Yeah, just the shirt is a bit ashed. Where did she go? She went into the forest. Well, this range has to our pleasure a kennel. There are 2 dogs which are trained to find guns and people. This is because the people have been trying to sneak out with guns or ammo. My dad is an off-duty officer, so he gets the dog and the security guard, then they go to find her. Her kids and I go behind them. After about 15 minutes of searching, the security guard spots her hiding in a bush. Look, she's right there. He unleashes the dog and it runs to the bush where Karen is. And just before the bush, Karen raises and shouts,
Stay away, you jerk!
And she shoots the dog. The dog howled in pain as the explosive pyro exploded in its face. The security guard yells, Hands up! Karen is right then tackled to the ground, apprehended and later charged for assault, stealing and injuring a police dog. At the court, she gets a total of 15 years in prison. Me and my dad then returned home, grabbed an air gun, and we went shooting tin cans until it was evening. And that was the end of it. Next story. Entitled Mother Threatens My Job. I was a jerk in response, but have no regrets. This happened long before Homo sapiens Karen was taxonomically described, but this county could well be named Karen Company for all the arrogance and entitlement this affluent enclave is renowned for. A lot of people here just suck. I taught part-time at the local community college, which means I only get paid for the time I teach. Extracurriculars are at my discretion. The semester's over, but I had to pick something up. I went to say hi to the department secretary whom I was friends with. She says, I know it is not your responsibility, but would you please contact this kid who's interested in taking the beginning class but wants some information? Frank's not getting back to him as usual and I feel bad for him. Okay, sure. Have him email me and I will do what I can. He emails me that he's a high school student in a program that allows him to take one college class. He's trying to decide between astronomy and my class. Would I call him so he could ask questions? I don't want him to have my phone number and I started the job with long hours where I wasn't getting home until around midnight. Plus, if he's this demanding now, what's he going to be like in class? I emailed him the details class syllabus that lays out the entire semester with every assignment and the due dates listed. I hated instructors who couldn't stick to the syllabus, so I always made sure mine were accurate. I tell him to feel free to email me any further questions. He responds he really needs to talk to me without elaborating why. I email him back that the syllabus is comprehensive and self-explanatory, but email me any specific questions. And I ended with, here is some friendly advice. It is a little rude to keep insisting on a private phone call after someone has expressed a clear preference for email. The next night, I get home exhausted and just wanting to go to bed. Of course, there is an email, but it is from his mother.
It is not rude to ask for a phone call, but wise. My son wasn't rude. You were. You lack self-respect and intelligence. I will be forwarding this to your department chair, Dr. So-and-so. You're unfit to teach and I will make sure you don't anymore.
This is the bullet point version. It was long and poorly written, laughable, really. I wasn't angry per se, but just annoyed enough to not let it slide. It's a character flaw I try not to indulge, but sometimes I just can't help it. I wrote, please stop with your petty threats. It is laughable and you're embarrassing yourself. If my job is contingent on the approval from an obnoxious parent like you, I will quit. I'm on summer vacation. I am not getting paid for this. I didn't have to respond to your son at all, but did so as a courtesy. Under no circumstances whatsoever do I owe anyone a phone call. As for my self-respect, I have enough not to cater to a parent with an inflated sense of entitlement and self-importance. I do not care if your son takes my class or not. It makes no difference to me. I have no shortage of students wanting to take my class. Then comes a gratuitous, somewhat cheap shot. I couldn't resist once I thought of it. Your son will be better off taking astronomy, where he will learn he's not the center of the universe. And you should take it with him. The kid probably did not deserve that, but oh well. His mother did. Edit. At the next semester's faculty, I apologized to the chair if I caused any problems, but she irked me. He laughed and said, I could tell, impressive. He said it was no big deal, they get angry parents all the time. He noticed mother and son had different last names, so she was probably the stepmother who pushed him about Colin, took it out on me when I told him he was rude. He read the emails and could see I was trying to help him. The secretary said, I am so sorry I asked you to contact him. You went out of your way and that was your reward. I told her that's okay, I kinda had fun with it, which made her burst out laughing. Next story. Landlord tries to keep us in a mold house. We get his place condemned by the city. I've lived in a lot of awful places throughout my college years, but this was one of the big ones. I had recently moved into a house with two other girls. It wasn't the best house, but seemed to look okay for a college apartment. One of the girls had a friend who had lived there before and told us that the landlord was sexist and kind of a jerk, but usually meant well, and it was decent rent. I'll be referring to him as dummy landlord. We were all broke, so we decided to sign a lease. I should have realized the warning signs when the dummy landlord wanted to sign it in a big voice, after he had just eaten dinner there. And the leasing agreement looked like he chopped it up from the other pictures of lease agreements on Google. We also found this apartment as an ad off of Craigslist. Things were fine for a few months. I was living alone until the next school year would start. And I wasn't home all of the time since I would go over to my boyfriend's a lot and sleep over. It was a split house with an apartment in the basement, and ours on the first floor. It was not long until I started to notice things happening. We'd get a good amount of rain, since we were in the Midwest by some big local lakes, and it was springtime. We'd get a good amount of water, and the concrete steps to the house would constantly fill up with water I had to jump over, and it would disappear overnight. It also started to get a little bit of a musty smell in the house, and I had started coughing and sneezing all the time, but I did not know why. Soon the other girls moved in, and we started having some difficulties with the dummy landlord. He wouldn't tell us when he'd come over to check on the property. He said he did this to keep up on looks and mow the lawn, but he did it way too often for any of us to be okay with. He would argue with us about having a copy of our own lease. He'd yell at us to give him rent payments in cash, especially before going to his cabin up north with his girlfriend. But the biggest of all was that we were having problems with mold, and he did not care. For a while we hadn't talked to the people in the basement apartment. until everyone started having problems with the dummy landlord. We'd hear them arguing and yelling down below about as often as we would upstairs. But they were in a hellhole. Everything they owned had mold growing on it. They had bugs everywhere, earwigs, beetles, ants, you name it. They were constantly throwing away their clothes, dishes, furniture, even their college papers and homework, since it was all growing mold. They spent money on plastic bins to hold most of their important items, but even those will get moldy. We also found out that they were supposed to have another roommate down below, but she couldn't live there from her allergies to mold after signing a lease agreement. We also found out that dummy landlord verbally abused her and her mother on the phone, to the point where they were crying and she couldn't get out of the lease. She ended up paying for the two places every month so that she didn't have to live there. Well, because he wouldn't let her break her lease, and he simply did not care. Upstairs wasn't as bad as the basement, but it wasn't good either. All of us were coughing more and more each month. We would wake up coughing in the middle of the night, and we were getting really sick. We tried to air out the house as best as we could, but nothing helped. I ended up getting a severe case of strep throat so bad that every swallow I took made my eyes water and made me verbally make noise from the pain. I tried to ask the doctor I went to if he could prove that this was from the mold later, but he unfortunately couldn't give me a solid statement on it. Me being a vocal, neutral, good person who was also going to school to be an architect, tried to explain to him what was going on this house. No air circulation. His concrete steps and foundation walls were not sealed, so all of the water I'd have to jump over was most likely going into the basement walls, causing most of the mold. We also found a few areas on the roof that needed patching, since we noticed some leaks among other things. The basement apartment had cheap patio doors for their only meant of entrance and exit, which would constantly be up against water when it rained, adding to the problem. Oh, smart dummy landlord decided that we were all just girls complaining about silly things that didn't mean anything. So he brushed us off and said we were fine, even though I had told him that I was learning about these things in school and knew what I was talking about. He wouldn't let us out of the lease as hard as we tried. So all of us girls in both apartments decided we would get out if it was the last thing we did. Then began researching all of the legal apartment and tenant information for our state and city to get out. We were paying for attorney's fees and started taking pictures of the mold upstairs and downstairs that we could find, talking with several different city staff, the police, and started compiling this into a nice document. After deferring my rent payment to get a copy of the lease agreement from dummy landlord, we could finally take a look at our legal document and use that further to get out. We were also working with another landlord at a renting company in town, who I will call the good landlord. He was thankfully doing his best to get us out of that hole and into his apartment. Through him, we'd get all the legal ins and outs of the renting business, and he would help us find a loophole. Then after months and months of arguments, money and researching, we found it. If we sent in a mold test to a research lab, and it was over the limit of what was inhabitable, we could get out. It was safe to say we had a pretty good idea it was over the limit. The tests came back a few days later, and we sent that off to the city, including our nice document of pictures, statements, and leasing agreements. Not even 4 hours went by, and we got a call from the city. Our house was so full of mold that we were to move out of the apartment within 24 hours, and it was to be condemned. We were ecstatic. All of that hard work had finally paid off. Although it was horrifying to know that the mold count was so high, The mold researcher, who had been in the business for more than 30 years, had not once seen a place with a higher mold count than this house. Yes, this included black mold. Fast forward to us happily packing up in our house, all of our parents getting us out together, us moving into the apartment that good landlord kept open for us to move into, and poor old dummy landlord sopping in our driveway as we happily stacked boxes into cars, complaining that he should have paid more attention and listened to us. This was his girlfriend's property, and she's going to dump him. We all took a picture the next day, smiling in front of the condemned signs. It is still one of my favorite pictures to this day. Serves him right for not listening to his tenants. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.